Disclaimer alert, I'm going to be using foul language during this office hours video, and there's a reason for it, just to emphasize a specific point. The question is, how do I know if my startup is shitty and I'm a shitty founder and I should just shut things down? There's a difference between a shitty startup and a shitty founder. I don't believe that there's anything like a shitty founder. I believe that there are shitty entrepreneurs that shouldn't be founders whatsoever. But if you're really giving it a go and you want to try to become a founder, I don't think you're shitty at all. But there is such a thing as a shitty startup, which usually comes back to a shitty idea with shitty execution. Now that I've said shitty enough, let's get into what to do and how to process this line of thinking. So, for example, let's say you've got My Startup Inc. and you're wondering, should I shut it down? Like, am I just laying a big steaming pile of poop and this is just crappy life and I'm just experiencing I'm not experiencing the success. I'm experiencing all the opposite things and I'm grinding my wheels and it's just not happening, and reality starts to set in and you look at everything that you built and it just looks like this. There's a reason the poop emoji exists. Well, what do you do when it comes to that? And how do you even get there? Well, you got to take a step back and you really have to analyze what's going on. So I'm going to give you a framework of 4 questions that you want to ask yourself, and you want to really be scientific and brutal about your responses. And so the questions you're going to ask are what, when, how, and who. And these are pretty ambiguous questions because every context is different. Every person is different. But I can tell you, I organize these questions, I research these questions based on how our brain works, so we don't get into emotional states and get into this stress response of this freeze, flight, or fight, or conform response that can cause us to make emotional decisions. So here's how it works. What you do is you ask yourself, what is happening exactly? Like, what is going on? And you gather the data, look for the facts. And they say that facts don't care about your feelings. Well, this is very important because although I care about your feelings and your feelings are very important, I'm not invalidating emotions and feelings at all. To take a unbiased approach and get rid of that confirmation bias, get rid of those emotions, and say, just from a pure, flat out scientific perspective, what's happening? What are the results that we are going to measure? What are the facts of this situation? I sat with a founder last week, and this founder was telling me, and I get to this place where I've done everything right, and I'm right about to sign these deals and get these customers going, and everything falls apart. I can't get people over the finish line. Well, okay, let's talk about what is going on. And then you want to look for, when does it happen? So answer that question a little bit for this example. You're looking for patterns. So you're looking to go through time and you're trying to understand, when does it happen? So in this case, it's always when it's a specific client or industry or particular type of user, and you're just analyzing all this. So maybe you're sitting there and people are coming and they're downloading your app, but they're not doing anything with it. Well, that's what you want to figure out, is what are the patterns. So what is going on? People are downloading my app because I get them to. And when does that happen? Well, when they get to this certain screen, and that's where you want to get into things like analyzing conversion rate optimization when it comes to something like this. But there could be so many other different things. Say you're raising money. All right, what's happening? Well, we get the meeting and they like the idea, but then we get there, what happens is they say no. When does it happen? Right when we get to traction. And they go, oh, we want to see you have more traction. And the reason we do this is, especially with fundraising, is a lot of times founders think the reason they're not getting yeses from investors is one thing, but the truth is it's really another thing. One of the truths could be people just don't want your product. Your timing is wrong, or you've built a problem looking for a solution. So for example, you might have said, okay, I'm gonna create this solution because I think it's really great. But as soon as you start putting it in front of people, they're not willing to buy. They're not downloading, they're not getting in there. Well, when does it happen? Well, one of the facts may be every time we go to market, people just don't want it. People come and they'll pay attention just because they're friends, but they're like, no thanks, we'll pass. So when does that happen? You're looking for patterns, and it's time-based patterns. Then you're going to ask how, and you're going to look for, causes, and you're going to ask yourself, how did we get here? How do we think we got here? And that's where you start to realize maybe looks like we built a solution trying to find a problem. We didn't build the solution around validating a problem first. This is how we got here, right? So how, and that's one of the most common reasons we end up with shitty startups. Or you might say, how do we get here? I made a bad decision and I compromised my values and end up saying yes to a co-founder I never should have said yes to because we're friends and all this stuff. That's a really good reason to analyze how we got here, right? And then you want to ask the final who questions. You want to ask, who am I? Who do I want to be? And with whom do I want to be with? Me with, okay? And the reason you ask these questions, and it may seem like, well, that has nothing to do with my startup. It has everything to do with your startup because you're the founder, and how you go is how your startup is going to go. And it's all identity. And these questions you're going to be asked, and it's going right to your prefrontal cortex. When you can understand your self-concept, your identity, what happens is self-esteem is different than self-concept. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. And we feel shitty about ourselves all the time as founders. Reality, I feel shitty, some form of shittiness on a daily basis. But my self-concept is what I know about myself. So if I say, who am I right now? Who am I right now? A lot of times I remind myself, I am a husband first, father second, and a leader in the community. Who do I want to be? I want to be a better leader in the community. I want to be an example. And whom do I want to be me with? Well, I'm doing this for my family. So that puts everything in perspective, activates the prefrontal cortex, which is the highest executive function of the brain, and takes you out of the what and the when and the how and all the shame and all the stuff that you're dealing with. And you get to answering these questions. And guess what? You go, maybe things aren't as important as they need to be, or maybe everything's in line and I am now motivated to go in and pivot the startup and things like that. But the last thing you want to do is get into what they call the sunk cost fallacy, and you hang on just for hanging on. Again, it's like that athlete that just trying to live those glory days. They've gotten to a certain place and they say, I have to do this. And that's where your identity is out of whack. And so they're just hanging on and hanging on. And it's just miserable, pathetic, and pitiful. And everyone just feels sorry for you. That's the last place that you want to be. And the founders that can really think this through, for example, I was talking to a founder and he just realized, Ed, we just don't have the total TAM to become a unicorn. And I want to, this is who I am as a founder, and I got family, and they're realistic. I don't have what it takes, and I have other priorities. I'm not this young founder who's 25. Many founders tell me this. They say, Ed, if I was 25 living in the basement, I'd probably maybe hang on for another 12 months and take a crack at this just to see, but I can't do that anymore. I had a founder tell me yesterday, Ed, I'm on the back nine. And that's a who am I and who do I want to be conversation. And we began discussing what does that look like for you, and we began asking identity questions to help perspective with what the next steps are, because that founder was in a shitty situation. And guess what, as your advisor and as part of our community at startups.com, we love commiserating together about shitty situations and shitty startups, because at the end of the day, we're not shitty people. We believe in all the founders. If you're listening to this, everybody deserves to be believed in. And I believe in the process of how you can get to where you want to be with your life. If you're willing to just be realistic and say, I'm going to ask what, when, how, who, and be totally brutal, reality check, gut punch, put it right between the eyes of the reality of our situation. There you have it. So if you think that you're sitting on My Startup Inc. as a shitty startup, ask those questions to yourself, and that will help you either reframe, move on, or reframe and say, you know what? Nice try. Let's get to the conclusion of this. So I don't want to feel shitty about myself anymore, but now I understand what I'm dealing with, and you can move forward. And that's what we want you to do, is move forward. Hopefully this has been kind of an encouraging video as far as office hours are concerned. But if you're feeling discouraged, feel free to reach out. We are going to help you walk through that. You're not alone. Sometimes it just helps to be around people who've experienced it before. I could probably trade shitty stories, story for story, tit for tat. Don't worry. Don't feel bad. Reach out. Let's talk. And I'll see you in the next video.